For 30 years I convinced myself I was imagining it, that the unease, the secrets, the late-night shadows weren't real. But proof has a way of showing up when you least expect it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. My husband Giorgio decided one night, over spaghetti and a half-finished bottle of wine, that our marriage needed a full-on revolution. The Spark? A podcast about radical honesty in relationships. From that moment, he declared it his new religion. We need to stop sugarcoating and start being brutally honest with each other, he announced, twirling his fork like he was about to make a TED Talk out of dinner. I looked at him and said as calmly as I could, Giorgio, we already are honest about the important stuff. But sometimes some things are better left unsaid. In reality, our marriage only worked at all because I learned how to hold my tongue. He of course didn't see it that way. That's toxic positivity, he shot back, waving his hand like he was dismissing a courtroom objection. You're prioritizing comfort over authentic connection. I tried warning him gently that he's actually really sensitive and maybe full unfiltered honesty wasn't going to feel as good as he imagined. But oh no, that set him off. Suddenly I was infantilizing him and proving that I must already be hiding things. That was all the evidence he needed to dig his heels in. For the next 3 days it became his entire personality. Every conversation circled back to my supposed fear of vulnerability. He started buying books on the subject, 5 of them, leaving them open around the house like some bizarre Easter egg hunt of highlighted passages. He blasted those podcasts at full volume, following me from room to room like a one-man parade of self-righteousness. By the 3rd night he woke me up at midnight, yes midnight, to lecture me about my red flag resistance to his new lifestyle choice. Half asleep I finally snapped. Fine, I told him, sitting up in bed. You want brutal honesty? You've got it. He actually clapped. Clapped. Like a kid being told we were going to Disneyland. The very next morning, over toast and coffee, he asked why I'd been so quiet at his parents' anniversary dinner. Oh, Giorgio, he had no idea what door he'd just opened. Because, I said, buttering my toast calmly, your mother spent the entire night comparing me to your ex-girlfriend, the one who's now a surgeon. She doesn't know you helped her cheat her way through medical school. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. His face went slack. That was unnecessarily harsh, he muttered. I smiled sweetly. This was your idea, remember? And once I started, I couldn't stop. Also, your dad kept groping the waitress, and everyone pretended not to notice. Because that's what your family does with uncomfortable truths. He tried to cut in, but I steamrolled right through. And your brother told me at Christmas that your parents only pretend to support your business ideas because they're terrified you'll have another breakdown. You know, like when you dropped out of law school. That afternoon, his coworker Miles came over to watch the game. Giorgio, still drunk on his honesty crusade, bragged about our new radical honesty policy and how it was making us a stronger couple. Since we're doing honesty, I said, setting down a plate of chips and dip, you should probably know that Giorgio only invites you because everyone else finds him exhausting and you're too polite to say no. Miles froze mid-chip. I wasn't done. He actually thinks you're boring, but you bring good beer and you don't overstay your welcome. So really, you're the perfect guest. Miles stared at me. Giorgio laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a joke. But I looked him dead in the eye and reminded him, radical honesty isn't about jokes. Then, for the finishing blow. And that promotion Giorgio's been bragging about? It's not a real promotion. It's a lateral move. His boss just wants him to quit without actually firing him. Miles suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be and practically ran out the door. By Thursday night it was dinner at his parents' country club. His father launched into his usual speech about building everything from nothing and family values. Perfect opening. Funny you mention values, I said, slicing my steak. Because Giorgio spent $8,000 on OnlyFans last year. Tried to hide it under business expenses. The sound of his mother's wine glass shattering on the table could have been a gunshot. His father turned beet red while Giorgio kicked me under the table, eyes wide with panic. It was for research. He blurted. Networking for my podcast. No, it was Candy, I interrupted. He was convinced she had a real connection with him. The credit card company even called me about fraud because he bought out her entire Amazon wish list, including a hot tub. To Phoenix. The table went silent except for his mother's hyperventilating gasps. Diners at surrounding tables turned to stare. By Friday, Giorgio was done, begging me to stop. You're not being honest, he cried. You're being cruel. I tilted my head. No, Giorgio. You wanted brutal honesty. You just thought I'd tell you what you wanted to hear, that you're secretly amazing and everyone else is wrong about you. The truth is, people only tolerate you because of your parents' money and connections. That broke him. He sat there sobbing, shoulders shaking, tears splashing onto his phone screen. And that's when it buzzed with a text from his mother. Where's your father? She wrote. I held up my own phone, showing him a post I'd just seen. His father. In Miami. With his 23-year-old mistress. Shopping for cribs. Don't you think you should tell your mom the truth? I asked quietly. He snatched the phone from me, his fingers trembling as he typed out some pitiful lie about traffic on I-95. His hands shook so hard he kept hitting the wrong letters, deleting and retyping while tears rolled onto the screen. Another buzz. His mom again. If he's in traffic, why isn't he answering his own phone? Giorgio looked at me with sheer desperation, silently begging me not to blow everything up. I took the phone back and typed, let's meet for coffee tomorrow. We'll explain then. He looked like he didn't recognize me anymore, like I was some stranger who had slipped into his life and ripped it wide open. That night, he paced the living room like a man awaiting execution. At 2 in the morning, I heard him whispering on the phone to his brother, warning him what was about to come. His brother? Not even surprised. He admitted he'd known about their dad's affairs for years. That sent Giorgio spiraling again. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he cried, over and over. By morning, he insisted he had to meet his mother alone first. "Soften the blow," he said. I let him go, but not before forwarding all the screenshots to myself. Just in case he decided protecting his father was more important than the truth. When he looked at me before walking out the door, it wasn't love or anger in his eyes. It was something colder. Like I had ripped away every illusion he'd been living under. And in that moment I realized, maybe I had. While Giorgio was off downtown meeting his mother at some cafe, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open and my heart pounding like a drum. 3 days of this radical honesty circus and I finally knew I was done. This wasn't just a rough patch. Something inside me had already broken. I typed divorce lawyers near me into Google. A name popped up again and again in reviews, Vicky Ridley, specializing in high-conflict divorces. Her past clients sounded eerily like me, women who'd stayed too quiet for too long. My hands were trembling as I dialed her office, but I managed to schedule an appointment for next week. Then I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the bank. I sat across from the teller, my voice steady but my stomach in knots, as I requested to open a new checking account. He helped me transfer exactly half of our joint savings into it. When I walked out with my new debit card in hand, it felt like holding the first piece of freedom I'd touched in years. 3 hours later, Giorgio came home. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one morning, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, face pale. Like something had died. And in a way, something had. His mother hadn't believed him at first, had accused him of inventing the affair just to hurt her. But when she demanded proof, he'd shown her the Instagram photos, her husband, Giorgio's father, picking out cribs with a woman barely older than Giorgio himself. His mother had gone silent, then walked out of the cafe without another word, heading straight to her sister's house and ignoring everyone's calls since. By lunchtime, his father was calling both of our phones nonstop. First, the voicemails were furious threats, defamation, slander, lawsuits if we didn't stop spreading lies. But then his tone shifted. He started offering money, bribes to make it all disappear, begging us to delete the evidence. Giorgio listened to each message with this hollow look, as if every word from his father carved another piece out of him. The man he'd worshipped his whole life was unraveling into something ugly right in front of him. By evening, it escalated. His father showed up at our front door, pounding so hard the walls rattled. Giorgio blocked the doorway while his father shouted insults across the lawn. The neighbors peeked through their blinds as everything spilled out, the mistress, the baby, the OnlyFans money. His father called me a manipulative witch who had poisoned Giorgio against his own blood. And for once, Giorgio defended me. They nearly came to blows before his father finally stormed off, threatening to cut Giorgio out of the will completely. Tires screeched as he drove away, leaving Giorgio shaking on the porch. That night, I booked an emergency therapy appointment with a counselor named Tess. Giorgio only agreed to go because he was desperate, clinging to the idea someone might tell him how to fix this mess. Me? I agreed because I needed answers of my own. I needed to know why I had let myself stay silent for so long. The next morning, Giorgio's coworker Miles started blowing up his phone. "Where are you? Why haven't you been to work? Is everything okay?" The messages piled up as we sat in silence at the kitchen table. Giorgio shoved his phone toward me and whispered, "Just text him I've got the flu." I stared at him. Lying isn't part of radical honesty. Remember? His jaw tightened. Then he hurled the phone against the wall so hard it exploded into pieces. The silence afterward was deafening. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. His mother. She didn't even say hello, just launched into demands. She wanted proof about the OnlyFans spending. Proof of everything I'd told her at the country club. So I pulled out my laptop, opened 3 years' worth of credit card statements and highlighted every charge. Each OnlyFans payment. Each wire transfer to Candy in Phoenix. Even the Amazon orders, including the hot tub. I scanned and emailed her the entire file while she sat on the other end of the line, breathing into the phone. When I hit send, she hung up without a word. 3 days later, we walked into Tessa's office for our first session. The waiting room was all vanilla candles and white noise machines, supposed to be soothing, but it just made my nerves worse. For the first 20 minutes, Giorgio took center stage. He painted me as this cruel, vindictive monster who had twisted honesty into a weapon to destroy his family. "She's having some kind of breakdown," he told Tess, his voice cracking with practiced sorrow. Tess didn't interrupt. She just listened. Then she asked, "Why did you want radical honesty in the first place?" He stumbled. He muttered something about podcasts, about how mature couples communicate. But when she pressed him, he had no real reason. Just, it seemed like the right thing to do. "And what does honesty mean to you?" she asked. "Truth. Building trust. Connection," he said quickly, like he'd memorized the words. "Then why," Tess asked gently, "did you only want honesty when you thought it would benefit you?" The color drained from his face. He started sputtering, denying it, but Tess stayed calm. She pointed out how he'd used the concept as a weapon first, guilting me for wanting privacy, for maintaining boundaries. She asked why he thought he could handle brutal truths when just law school stress had once broken him completely. That was it. Giorgio shot up, face crimson, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the framed certificates on the wall rattled. I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me. Tess gave me a small, reassuring smile. We can continue, just the two of us if you'd like. So I did. For 40 minutes I poured it all out. Things I'd never said aloud to anyone, not even myself really. The exhaustion. The constant emotional labor. The way I had to predict his moods, filter his world, keep him from exploding over the smallest criticism. The Christmas when his brother whispered to me that Giorgio had been like this his entire life. The nights I sat up until dawn calming him after tantrums. Tess nodded softly. She told me I wasn't crazy. That what I'd done might seem extreme, but it was a natural response to years of walking on eggshells. Years of swallowing truths that were eating me alive. When I left her office I had something I hadn't felt in years. A plan. A therapist. And, for the first time in a long time, the sense that I wasn't trapped anymore. When I got back home that night the scene was bleak. Giorgio was sprawled across the couch passed out, surrounded by a graveyard of empty beer bottles. The landline was ringing, caller ID flashing Ari, his office manager. I answered. Is everything okay? Ari asked immediately. His voice carried more worry than judgment. Giorgio hasn't shown up in 3 days. He's not answering anyone. I forced my tone steady. He's dealing with a family emergency. Technically true, though it felt more like a family implosion. Ari hesitated, then sighed. I'm sorry to say this, but several clients have been complaining about him for months. Missed deadlines, showing up unprepared. Sometimes drunk. I thanked him, promised Giorgio would be in touch, even though deep down I knew he wouldn't. Before I could catch my breath, my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. I opened it and froze. There she was. The mistress. Smiling in Miami with a diamond on her finger so big it could blind you. The caption said yes to my forever ring, red heart, red heart, red heart. I screenshotted everything before it could vanish. Within minutes my phone lit up again, this time with his mother's name. When I answered all I heard was sobbing. She'd seen it too. Her voice cracked as she asked how her husband could propose to someone else while still married to her. I stayed on the line for 2 hours while she cycled through rage, grief, humiliation. How did I miss this for 30 years? She cried. I didn't have the heart to tell her she hadn't missed it at all, she just looked away. 4 days later Giorgio finally dragged himself back to work. He returned before lunch, eyes swollen, face blotchy. He admitted he'd broken down in front of the entire team during a presentation, sobbing uncontrollably until Ari pulled him aside and suggested personal leave. The promotion he'd bragged about for months? Gone. Whispers about firing him were already spreading. That evening my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, and I'd never heard her so furious. She told me Giorgio's father had actually called my parents, begging them to talk sense into me about destroying his family. My mother let him have it. Called him a pathetic old man who couldn't keep it in his pants, then had the audacity to blame others for the wreckage. My father got on the line and promised that if Giorgio's father ever contacted them again, he'd handle it personally. I'd never felt so proud or so supported. The next morning as I was getting dressed, Giorgio stormed in holding a small white rectangle, Vicky's business card. The one I tucked in my purse. His face was purple with rage. You've been planning this the whole time, haven't you? He shouted, shaking the card like it was a weapon. Plotting to destroy me and take everything. I calmly took the card back, slipped it into my pocket and walked to the kitchen. He followed me, yelling betrayal, demanding to know how long I'd been scheming. The doorbell rang. His brother. He looked pale, worried. Their mother had called him crying over the Instagram post. Giorgio immediately launched into a rant about how I was tearing the family apart, but his brother just shook his head. This isn't the first time, Giorgio, he said quietly. Then he sat down at our table and laid it all out, 3 other women over the years. Each time their mother found out. Each time she stayed. Each time their father smoothed things over with expensive gifts. Giorgio sat frozen, mouth open, like his entire world was crumbling piece by piece. The next morning I had my solo session with Tess. I spent the whole hour unraveling threads from my childhood, how I'd always been the emotional manager, keeping the peace, smoothing things over. Tess looked at me and said, gently but firmly, that Giorgio's honesty demand was never about connection. It was about control. Just another hoop I was expected to jump through perfectly. For the first time I let myself believe her. 2 days later the credit card company called. Suspicious activity, a $1,000 plane ticket to Phoenix. I didn't need to guess who it was for. I froze the account immediately. At lunch, when Giorgio's card was declined, he stormed home screaming that I was financially abusing him. I pulled up the attempted charge on my phone. He went silent, then mumbled excuses about Candy, just being a friend who needed help. That afternoon his mother called again. Her voice was shaking. She asked me to come with her to confront his father downtown. She didn't want to face him alone. We drove in silence. When we walked into his office waiting room, the air went out of her lungs. Sitting there was a young blonde woman, hand resting on her very pregnant belly. His mother stopped, spine stiffening. Then she walked straight to the receptionist. My lawyer will be in touch, she said calmly before turning on her heel and leaving. She never even looked back at the pregnant woman, who blinked at us, confused, asking who we were. His mother just pressed the elevator button and walked out with her head held high. That night Giorgio begged. He fell to his knees crying, asking me to try couples therapy, swearing he'd do anything to fix us. I told him I'd only go if he also committed to individual therapy for his sex addiction. He snapped back instantly. I don't have an addiction. I just like adult content. That's normal. But the truth was clear. His mistress posting engagement photos now, flaunting that ring, it felt like deliberate sabotage. Like she wanted the final blow to land publicly. And Giorgio? He wasn't ready to change. He just wanted to manipulate me into staying. The following week, I sat across from Vicky in her office while she combed through our finances. She found everything. A hidden savings account with $3,000. Patterns of large cash withdrawals during business trips that probably never existed. She pieced together a trail of lies. On Tuesday, Miles stopped by to check on Giorgio. He found him drunk on the couch at 2 p.m., mumbling about everyone abandoning him. Miles tried to coax him into drinking water, but Giorgio wouldn't budge. I got home from work to find the mess and Miles pulled me aside. He admitted he'd been worried about Giorgio's drinking for a year but hadn't known how to say anything. So I told him. All of it. The addiction. The affairs. The divorce. Miles just nodded slowly, as if puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. That explains a lot, he murmured. 3 weeks later, Giorgio's mother filed for divorce. Served her husband at their country club golf game, papers handed to him in front of all his friends. Gossip spread like wildfire through their social circle. Giorgio's phone buzzed nonstop with texts from family friends demanding answers. Finally, in a rage, he hurled it against the wall and screamed that I'd destroyed his family's reputation. At our next session with Tess, she asked him again to take accountability. He twisted, deflected, blamed me. Tess was unrelenting. She kept circling him back to his own demand for radical honesty. Finally, his shoulders slumped. In a broken voice, he admitted it. He thought honesty meant I'd build him up, say nice things, while he got to feel superior for being so evolved. Tess looked him straight in the eye and told him that wasn't honesty. That was control. And once again, Giorgio wept. Meanwhile, I'd been making quiet moves. Apartment hunting. I found a one-bedroom with a doorman closer to work, with reviews that spoke of safety and peace. When I told Giorgio I planned to move out at the end of the month, he alternated between begging and rage, sobbing one moment, calling me heartless the next. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom for 5 minutes of silence. My phone buzzed with a new Facebook message request. The profile picture showed a bleached blonde woman clutching a designer purse. The preview said, "I'm his father's mistress. I need to tell my side." I opened it. 3 paragraphs about how she wasn't the only one. 2 other women were pregnant too. She wanted to make sure his wife knew everything before the lawyers circled in. I screenshotted the entire message, sent it to his mother's lawyer, then blocked her. Outside the bathroom door, Giorgio paced, calling my name, asking if I was okay. His phone rang, it was Ari. I heard Giorgio slip into his fake professional mode, but within minutes his voice cracked, stumbling over excuses. Even through the door, I could hear Ari's rising frustration. When he finally hung up, Giorgio punched the wall hard enough to leave a dent. He came storming down the hall, face twisted. "They've put me on a performance plan," he spat. "Clients are complaining. And it's your fault. All this family drama, you sabotaged me." I didn't argue. I went to the kitchen, put water on for pasta, and let him rant behind me. The next morning, I sat in Tessa's office again. She leaned forward, eyes serious. She told me what I already knew in my bones, that his escalation was dangerous. That I needed to move out sooner, not later. By the end of that session, I had movers booked for the following week. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Like I was finally stepping out of the cage I'd been holding shut myself. That afternoon, as I sat in the grocery store parking lot, his mother called. Her voice was different this time, calmer, almost steady. She thanked me. Thanked me for opening her eyes. For breaking the facade she'd been upholding for 30 years. "I always knew something was wrong," she whispered. "I just didn't want to admit it." She told me she'd started therapy herself. That watching me refuse to play along anymore had given her permission to stop pretending too. And then she said something I'll never forget, for the first time in decades. "I can breathe." We hung up and I realized we weren't just in-laws anymore. Somehow, through all this chaos, we had become allies. Maybe even friends. 2 days later, while I was answering emails, Giorgio shuffled into the kitchen clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. His eyes were swollen, breath sour with last night's whiskey. "Candy just messaged me," he said, voice shaking. "She's pregnant. She needs money for the baby." He held the screen out like it was Exhibit A, proof I'd been wrong about something. The DM was dramatic, lots of crying emojis, and attached was an ultrasound image with a crisp white border that looked suspiciously generic. I zoomed in and yep, there was the faint watermark you see on every stock photo site if you've ever typed ultrasound. "We've never even met in person," he added quickly, as if that somehow solved the math problem. "It's all been online." I looked from the photo to his face. Radical honesty includes admitting when you've been scammed. His cheeks flushed a furious red. He snatched the phone back, blocked her, then muttered to himself, "She felt so real. She was different." Our next couple's session with Tess was supposed to be about communication tactics, timers, I feel statements, all the usual. Instead, Giorgio used all 50 minutes like a closing argument. He cataloged my sins with dates and timestamps, cruel, manipulative, vindictive. I'd weaponized his call for honesty and set fire to his life. Every brutal thing I'd said, every secret I'd revealed, every bridge I'd torched, he stacked them up like evidence boxes on a courtroom dolly. Tess let him run for 20 minutes, then raised a hand. "Name one moment, just one, where you took responsibility for anything that happened." Silence. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He tried to pivot back to me. Tess brought him to the question. He tried a second time, she steered him again. Nothing. He stormed out, the door shuddering on its hinges. Tess booked me for the next day without missing a beat. By then I had already signed the lease on a small, bright one-bedroom 20 minutes away, deadbolt, security cameras, responsive landlord who actually answered emails. While Giorgio was at work trying to satisfy his performance plan, I started packing. Brown boxes I'd hidden in the garage. Bubble wrap snapping under my fingers. I was wrapping plates in yesterday's newspaper when I heard his car way too early, gravel crunch, door slam. He walked in, saw the boxes, saw me holding our wedding china wrapped in classifieds, and his face collapsed into a child's. "Please don't," he whispered, voice breaking as he trailed me from room to room. He promised 1,000 impossible things. He tried to tug the box from my hands. I sidestepped and kept packing. He called his brother, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. An hour later, his brother pulled up with a pickup truck and a look that said he'd expected this. He took in the scene, the boxes, the begging, the neighbors pretending not to stare from their driveways, and quietly started loading. Giorgio sat on the lawn narrating his heartbreak to the street like a town crier, taking turns between wailing about betrayal and shouting that I was abandoning him in his hour of need. His brother finally turned to him and said, low and firm, "You're making this worse. Get up." When the last box slid into the truck, his brother apologized to me. "You deserved better than what you got from us," he said. Then he added, almost to himself, that he'd always known Giorgio was difficult. He just hadn't realized how bad it had become. That afternoon the local news ran a segment, "Prominent businessman's assets frozen amid multiple paternity claims." No names, but in a town our size they didn't need to. My phone pinged, his mother sent a single laughing emoji. The first genuine joy I'd heard from her in years. She followed with, "He's at a motel. Court froze everything. 2 more women are pregnant. Both have lawyers." A week into my new apartment, Ari called. Giorgio had missed an important client meeting, the third strike. "Do you know where he is?" he asked, voice brittle with fatigue. I gave Ari his brother's number and told him I wasn't Giorgio's emergency contact anymore. When I hung up, it felt like setting down 1,000-pound weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying everywhere. That first night alone, my phone began buzzing around midnight, again and again until the screen glowed like a beacon. 43 voicemails. I put the phone on speaker and made tea. The first few messages were messy crying, apologies, promises to change. Then it turned sharp, accusations, jealousy, imagined lovers. Message 32, threats to hurt himself if I didn't call back. The last 11 were just my name, over and over, broken like a prayer. I forwarded every one of them to Vicky with a note. "Would this help with a restraining order?" Her text came back immediately, "Absolutely. Keep documenting." Around 2 a.m., Miles texted to ask if I was awake. Giorgio had shown up at his door with a suitcase and wouldn't leave. He'd plowed through half of Miles's liquor cabinet and was now looping through a nostalgia slideshow of our photos. "Should I be worried he'll do something stupid?" Miles asked. I told him yes, if Giorgio threatened to hurt himself or anyone else, to call 911 right away. 3 days later, his mother asked me to lunch to celebrate. I barely recognized her at the downtown bistro, sleek haircut, clothes that fit her like she'd finally remembered she had a body. She ordered champagne and clinked my glass. "I filed this morning," she said, smiling like the sun had come back. Her lawyer expected half of everything plus alimony. Hidden accounts were already turning up like seashells at low tide. She'd enrolled in salsa, booked a trip to Greece with her sister. "To radical honesty," she said, raising her flute. "Finally doing something useful." That afternoon in Tessa's office I broke. The guilt came in waves. Had I blown up an entire family just to prove a point? Tess passed me tissues, her voice steady. "The affairs existed before I spoke them aloud. The money was already flowing to Candy before I highlighted it. The foundation rotted long before I knocked." "Silence doesn't solve rot," she said. "It just lets it grow in the dark." 2 days later, Giorgio's brother called me at work. Giorgio had been fired after showing up drunk and screaming at Ari in front of clients. Security escorted him out while he shouted about betrayal. "He might come to your place," his brother warned. I drove straight to the hardware store. Bought an extra deadbolt, a door bar, a camera that sent live video to my phone. I installed everything myself that night, metal on metal, the bolts biting into the frame. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and brittle. At 3 a.m. Saturday, the pounding started. He was outside my door, slurring my name, rattling the handle. I watched him sway on the camera and called 911, staying on the line as he kept yelling that I had destroyed his life and the police should arrest me. Officers arrived in under 10 minutes. I watched them on the feed, calm voices, hands open. They served the temporary restraining order I'd already filed. He argued, then finally sagged as they led him away. Monday, Vicky filed the divorce officially, fault marked on Giorgio's side for financial deception and addiction. A judge signed a temporary order, 500 feet from me and my office. That night, I slept 8 uninterrupted hours. No buzzing phone. No listening for keys in the door. Just quiet. The family saga rolled on without me. His father's mistress gave birth and immediately filed for child support. Then 2 more babies arrived within days. Court-ordered DNA tests came back triple positive. His mother sent a photo from Italy, her in front of the Colosseum, sunglasses on, wine glass raised, funded by money her lawyer had pried out of offshore accounts. In therapy, a deeper truth surfaced. I had been managing difficult men since childhood. An alcoholic father taught me to swallow words and tiptoe around moods. I married a man who felt familiar, who needed the same curation of reality to stay calm. I'd been performing triage on other people's emotions for so long that I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was survival. 2 months into the chaos, his brother delivered an ultimatum: rehab or lose the family's support forever. Giorgio chose rehab, sex addiction and alcohol. A few weeks in, a letter arrived, 5 pages of explanations and 0 ownership. He wanted forgiveness without confession. I dropped it in the trash and felt nothing but relief. 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse while Vicky leafed through final exhibits. The judge reviewed bank records, the TRO violations, the documented addictions. He ruled cleanly in my favor. I kept the house, most of our savings, and 3 years of alimony. Giorgio appeared via video from rehab, eyes down, nodding when asked if he understood. Vicky shook my hand afterward and said it was the simplest judgment she'd seen in years because the facts were so stark. That weekend, Miles asked to meet. He sat across from me at a cafe, hands wrapped around his mug like it might steady him. He apologized for staying quiet, admitted he'd seen Giorgio's decline for a year and didn't know how to intervene. He introduced me to his sister later that week. She'd survived a similar marriage. Once a month, the 3 of us met for lunch. It felt like finding a small raft after a long swim. Giorgio's mother called one evening laughing, light girlish. She'd started seeing someone from Salsa, a man named Robert who brought her flowers every Friday. That honesty disaster, she joked, was the best thing that ever happened to me. At 6 months post-divorce, I was waiting for a latte when someone said my name. Candy. Without the filters and stage makeup, she looked human. Tired. Younger. Older. She told me she was in therapy, that she'd scammed dozens of men the same way, that she was sorry for being part of the wreckage. We talked for 20 minutes. I believed her remorse, not as absolution but as a beginning. A year after the explosion, I met someone at book club who made me laugh without trying. We were boringly honest in ordinary ways. I'm tired, your playlist gives me a headache, let's order pizza and not talk about feelings tonight. It was blissful not to manage anyone's storms. 14 months after the papers were stamped, Giorgio asked to meet and make amends as part of his program. We picked a coffee shop near his brother's office, neutral ground. He looked softer. He took responsibility without buts or ifs. Therapy had shown him the bottomless pit he'd been trying to fill with attention, fantasy, validation. He said the country club still traded stories about his parents' nuclear divorce. His father was drowning under 4 child support orders for babies born within 6 months of each other. His mother had bought a beach house and was hosting dinner parties for divorced women, sending me photos of sunsets and champagne toasts labeled freedom. Sometimes, late at night in my quiet apartment, I think about the irony. Giorgio demanded radical honesty expecting romance movie magic, 2 souls evolved by truth. Instead, honesty unstitched every fantasy his family had been living in. His mother stepped into her life. I stepped into mine. Even he, dragged and bleeding, finally stepped in to help. The truth didn't stitch us together, it showed us where we didn't fit. It didn't save a perfect marriage, it revealed there had never been one, only me endlessly smoothing the surface. And yet here I am. No more performing. No more managing. Just a life that fits. The greatest gift Giorgio ever gave me wasn't love or loyalty. It was permission to stop pretending and to live, finally, as myself. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.